Welcome to our next installment of the series, Origins of the Roman Empire. In today's episode, we look at the Roman family in the time of the kings and early days of the Republic, the marriage and moral laws under Emperor Augustus, and all later developments are not considered here. The natural Roman household comprised the father, the mother, the sons and daughters, the servants and all available material goods. Polygamy was an exception to the norm. It was not a classic family model. The German historian Theodor Mommsen put forward the theory that the deeper the construct of the family goes, the more highly developed a culture is. I can only agree with this, even if the social value of the family is decreasing nowadays, especially in the Western world. The construct itself is very complex. In antiquity, none is as well thought out and internalized as the Roman one. It is simple, but is consistently implemented by society and in its jurisprudence. The Roman family consisted of a free man who only came into his own through the death of his father. With the solemnization of marriage, conferiatio, his wife, her sons and grandsons, their wives by marriage, their unmarried daughters and granddaughters and their possessions also came under his control. The daughters' children were excluded from this unit, as they either belonged to the man's family if they were married, or were not part of any family at all if they were unmarried. A house of one's own and numerous children seemed to the Roman citizen to be the highest goal in life. This civic duty was taken very seriously by the Roman people. Death was not an evil, but the extinction of the house or even the family was a great misfortune. For this reason, even in the earliest times, it was legally possible to take foreign children into one's family. There was a morally ordered position within the family. Only the man could be the head of the family. Although the woman was not inferior in the acquisition of property and money, for example, the daughters received the same inheritance as the brother or the mother, the same as the children. She still belonged to the house and not the community. She was therefore not legally subject to the king, but to her father or husband. Although the man did not in fact have power of ownership over the woman, the legal concepts of formal tradition, coemptio, and limitation were applied to her. This gave the man the opportunity to gain legal ownership over the woman. Within the house, the woman was not a servant but a mistress. The maidservants did the housework, such as cooking or grinding grain, and the mistress merely supervised them. The woman worked the spindle like the man worked the plough. There was a clear division of roles. Parents had a moral obligation towards their children, and it was considered a serious outrage if the father neglected, spoiled, or squandered the child's wealth. The family was legally governed by the will of the father of the house, pater familias. Everything within the house is without rights vis-à-vis him, whether animal, slave, wife, or child. Apart from later political marriages of the patricians, the virgin was free to choose her future husband. The only support the woman received from the community was in the case of triplets. With the exception of miscarriages, the abandonment of sons was generally prohibited. In the case of daughters, at least, the first should be kept. The head of the household had the right and duty to exercise judicial power over his family and to punish them at his own discretion for life and limb. The adult son could set up a separate household or receive his own livestock, peculium, from the father, but legally any acquisition belonged to the father, regardless of what he had acquired or produced. As long as the father was alive, the person subject to him could never own property, sell it without his consent, and never bequeath it. In this respect, the wife and child were on the same level as the slave, who was also allowed to set up his own household or dispose of property with permission. Paternal or marital authority was subject to a legal restriction in that, as in the case of unauthorized abandonment, there could be a legal penalty, such as the religious curse. In this case, it affected the person who sold his wife or married son. It was family custom to seek the opinion of the closest blood relatives, both husband and wife, in cases of domestic jurisdiction. However, they only had an advisory role. The paterfamilias always had the power of decision. The power of the father was unchangeable as long as he lived, no matter how old or ill. The only way to change the ruler was through marriage or adoption. If the head of the house died, the sons took over the power of the house. Women could not exercise power over themselves, tutelar. They remained with the house to which they belonged, unless the male tribe died out or they married. The difference between family and their clan, gens, was based on the counting of the male line. The family comprised only those who could prove their descent from a common ancestor from generation to generation. See, for example, Quintus, son of Quintus, grandson of Quintus, etc., of the Quintians. The family extended so far that all ascendants up to the ancestor or name-giver could be designated individually. The lineage of the gens included those who could prove their descent, but not their full degree. However, there were others who belonged to this closed system of family and lineage. These were not the slaves or house guests, but the so-called clients. These were those who, without being free citizens of a community, were in a state of protected freedom. These included people who had fled the country and were taken in by a patron, or servants who had been given their freedom and now joined the master as clients. In contrast to the guest, this relationship was not subject to a strict legal framework. The client was an unfree individual. Together with the slaves, the clients formed a servitude, familia, dependent on the will of the citizen, patronus. The patronus was authorized to seize the client's property, punish him, or return him to slavery, even if the clients were generally treated more leniently than the slaves. There was a higher moral obligation towards them to care for them and represent them. In my opinion, the importance of the Roman family system cannot be overemphasized and is fundamental to understand the ancient community of this Italic tribe. In the next episode, we will look more closely at the Roman state administration. In the early days, Rome was ruled by a king. This period normally receives little attention in research, literature, or YouTube. These gaps in our knowledge need to be filled. See you next time, your geek philosopher.